Hi, we've talked about while loops before, where you have the option in the while loop of repeating a block of code more than one time. For loops are going to remind us of while loops in that they have the ability to repeat one or more lines of code multiple times. A for loop is a way to iterate over values from something that is iterable, like a string or a tuple or a list. So in this little example, this 2-line example, I've got a for loop, and I'm going to look one at a time at each character in this string. And the end of the for loop is just like the end of the while loop or an if statement where we have the colon. And then we'll indent everything inside of that for loop. So the only thing inside is going to be we want to print x. Now in the while loop, we had to change the value of x if we were going to use x to go through a loop a certain number of times. But this time the value of x is going to change on its own based on whatever the next character in the string is. So let's see what happens when we run this. Let me go ahead and save it. And I'll go ahead and run this module, and I see that it does print each line from, this is a string, one at a time. So I said that you could iterate over any strings or tuples or lists. So let's try another string, and we'll iterate over each of those characters in the string, and we're going to print them one at a time. And we could include even more inside this print statement if we want to. And go ahead and run this. And we're going through and getting the different letters from hello. We could also iterate over a list. So a list has comma separated values inside of it. And when we run this, we're going to go through each of those items in my list. It could also be iterating over a tuple. The tuple is like a list, only you can't change it. It's immutable. So we'll go ahead and run that with a tuple, and we'll iterate over each item in our list. So far so good. Sometimes you don't have a list in hand or a string or a tuple that you want to iterate over, but you want to do something a certain number of times. So for instance, I want to print the word hello a certain number of times, and I don't have a list or a tuple, but I want to create one on the fly. Well, we would do that with a command called range. And range can take more than one argument, but if you just pass in one argument, 5, I want to create a range between 0 and 4, I would do that with this command. So it's not going to create exactly a list, but it's going to create something between the range of 0 and 5, not including the 5. So let's see what it creates. And you'll only be able to get the next item in that iteration by calling the for loop another time. So I'll go ahead and run this. And the first time through the for loop, it sets x to 0. The next time it sets x to 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then it stops before it gets to 5. And I could set that range to an even higher number if I want, but it's going to scroll off the screen. We can also have a starting value and an ending value for our range. So let's say I want to go from 10 to 16, but really I want to stop before I hit 16. So I'll go ahead and run that, and we'll print those different values. What if I just want to print even numbers between 10 and 20? Well, not only can you specify your starting value, you can also specify your ending value and the step that you want to take each time you go through the for loop. So I'll go ahead and run this, and we see we get 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and it will stop right before it reaches 20. And that's an example of a for loop.